Krystel Zambrano. I'm an attorney. I specialize in assisted reproductive technologies, and I've represented hundreds of surrogates, intended parents, and donors who are pursuing surrogacy and egg donation journeys. I love working with surrogates mostly just because I think, what you're doing and the sacrifices that you're making are so special. So thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. Hopefully this is enlightening, or it sheds some light on some of the things you've been going through, or maybe it'll serve as a good base as you start the legal phase of your journey. I think the message for today's call is that your contract is like your Bible. First topic we're going to cover is understanding your surrogacy contract. This contract is the basis of the intended parent's parental rights, meaning that the statute requires it in order to be in compliance with state law, which will govern who's the parent of the baby. So if we don't have a contract, then we don't know, and we don't have any basis to say that you, the surrogate, are not the legal parent. And I know that you girls don't want the baby, so it is important to have it, and that's why we need it. The contract will cover everything from where you deliver to your finances, how do you communicate with your intended parents. So, the contract will also talk about lifestyle things. So for example, what you can and cannot do during your cycle and your pregnancy. So most contracts will cover the very basic things that all pregnant girls know, right? No alcohol, no smoking, no drugs, you need medical approval for prescription medications. But then there are other things that maybe you didn't think about that touch upon your personal life a little bit more, and you want to pay attention to those as well. So for example, maybe your contract includes guidelines about what kind of beauty or self-care products you can use, when you can dye your hair. From my experience, most intended parents and surrogates are aligned when it comes to those terms. They pretty much have the same views on when that should be allowed, etc. But again, it's important that you read that portion of your contract, or that you ask your lawyer what the contract says about that, just to make sure that you feel like, okay, I can fulfill the terms of this contract. This aligns with, my lifestyle, or it's a small sacrifice that I can make to make my intended parents feel comfortable. Okay. Another thing that the contract will cover is travel. So what are the guidelines that you have to follow if you are going to travel during your surrogacy journey? And why does it matter? Why does it matter where a surrogate goes? Two reasons. The first one is we want to make sure that you're delivering in the state where you live, and where, we've gone months and months planning a delivery in a certain state. We've looked at that state's laws. So we want to make sure that you deliver there. If you're traveling to a state where maybe surrogacy is not allowed, in the third trimester of your pregnancy, and you deliver there, your intended parents might have some legal complications. So we want to avoid those types of issues. We also want to make sure that we have guidelines regarding travel in order to make sure that you're protected, because what if your insurance company or carrier doesn't cover your medical expenses if you're traveling out of state? Who pays for those medical bills, right? Emergencies happen, even in the healthiest of pregnancies. So we just want to make sure that you have proper guidelines so that if you do travel, both you and your intended parents are protected. Most contracts will say that medical approval is required for any travel during pregnancy. That's pretty normal from my experience. And they'll also say that travel during the third trimester is restricted, just because, again, we want to make sure that you're close to your hospital and you're delivering in network with your hospital, and that the state laws that we plan for apply. So when I'm working with my surrogates, I always ask, do you have any travel plans in the next year that we want to disclose to your intended parents right now? Because if you do, then we want to make sure that the timing of your travel is acceptable, that it matches your transfer schedule or where you might be on a pregnancy. And we also want to make sure that your intended parents are comfortable and that travel doesn't pose additional risks. Another point, communication. So how often do you have to update your intended parents regarding the pregnancy? Some surrogates, some intended parents will be in touch. They don't need to look at guidelines. They'll be in touch pretty consistently. Other girls are super busy, with work, children, life. And so you want to know what is the minimum that you have to do under your contract. Most contracts will say either weekly contact or bi-weekly. So you just want to know how often you have to update your intended parents regarding the status of the pregnancy, how you're feeling, etc. Are your intended parents allowed to attend your medical appointments? Are they allowed in the delivery room? Under what circumstances? And what happens if only one person is allowed in the delivery room due to either medical complications or, during the pandemic, we had a lot of restrictions that we had to follow. So you want to, again, make sure that you're comfortable with what your contract says about your experience in the delivery room, right? The intended parent's ability to be present and to see the birth of the baby is just as important as your comfort and you feeling, secure in this also very vulnerable moment, right? Delivery is difficult. The basic points that your contract will cover are how many embryos will be implanted. Are you agreeing to transfer one embryo? Are you agreeing to transfer maybe two or more, depending on the quality of the embryos? And what are the conditions under which the parties can terminate or reduce a pregnancy? This is important. I think every contract should say that if your life or your health as a surrogate are severely at risk, then you as a surrogate should be able to make a decision as to whether you continue with the pregnancy or not. The contract's job is essentially to memorialize what you've already talked about with your agency and your intended parents and your psychologist. Usually by the time you get to legal, you've talked about it like 3-4 times. But again, important that the contract is accurate and that it reflects those discussions. Another point is health insurance. So this is also intended to protect both you and your intended parents. Your intended parents want to make sure that you have health insurance coverage so that, they're not stuck paying $100,000 for a pregnancy and delivery. And you as a surrogate, you want to make sure that you also have health insurance that's surrogacy friendly so that your medical expenses are covered and you don't get stuck with medical bills that, nobody's able to pay. Contract specifically will talk about what insurance policy is going to be purchased or used if you already have a policy, who's going to be responsible for the premiums associated for the policy. In a lot of cases, intended parents pay the premiums, and other cases, depending on the circumstances, the surrogate pays the premium. So it really, depends on the match. How long the intended parents are responsible for premiums if they're paying those. And the contract will also discuss the intended parent's duty to pay for your copays, your deductible, any coinsurance, up to the amount of the maximum out of pocket. So it's going to be purchased. You as a surrogate do have some duties as it pertains to your health insurance, and your contract's also going to talk about that. So for example, any medical bills that are not submitted directly to insurance have to be submitted by you to the insurance carrier. You cannot cancel or make changes to your health insurance without having talked to your agency and having the approval of your intended parents. So there's going to be a lot there about health insurance. And again, it'll be your lawyer's job to explain that to you and to make sure that you are covered so that, we have the peace of mind that that your medical bills are going to be paid for when your journey's done. Another item is your trust account. So as you know, the intended parents are going to set up a trust account where they're going to deposit all of the funds that are necessary for them to make the payments to you as their surrogate throughout your surrogacy journey. Normally, intended parents will make a big deposit after the contract is signed by both parties, and then another big deposit usually after heartbeat confirmation. And again, the contract's going to say how much the intended parents need to deposit in trust, when they make those deposits, what is the minimum amount that they need to keep in trust throughout your surrogacy journey. You know, as the payments get made, of course, the balance is going to go down, but the contract is going to include that protection for you so that there's always a minimum balance, and so that we know that there's always going to be funds in the account to make sure that your compensation and reimbursements are made. That your attorneys don't really have access to your trust account. So it'll be your job as a surrogate to work with your agency to make sure that the trust account is funded. Normally, your agency will make sure that that's the case and you don't have to worry about it. But if that's something that's on your mind, you can always work with your agency for that confirmation. And then you'll also be working with your agency to submit your payment request and to ensure that the balance is always in line with the minimums in the contract. The contract's also going to talk about how long the trust account stays open after your delivery or after your contract is terminated. As you know, medical bills can take weeks, if not months, to be processed and sent to the patients. So you want to know how long your trust account stays open so that you can keep in mind that deadline to work with your medical providers and make sure that you've gotten all your medical bills, that you submitted them to your agency for payment, and that they've been paid in a timely manner so that your balances with the hospital, your doctors, is zero before the trust account is closed. Now, your agency is going to be doing a lot of this work in the background where they will be, you know, checking in with you, making sure that everything's been paid before the trust account is closed. But I also think it's helpful to be proactive to make sure that everything is getting paid in a timely manner so that when that deadline comes, the trust account can just be closed and the intended parents can also close out their journey and get whatever remaining funds are left in the account back to maybe use for the care of their newborn baby. And then the last thing that I think is important as a surrogate, and I think the part that most of my clients really pay attention to, is what does the contract say about your compensation and reimbursements. So you will have signed a benefits package at the beginning of your journey. That benefits package outlines your compensation, what the amount of your compensation is, when it's due, what reimbursements you're entitled to. So the contract is going to take those terms and simply memorialize them in a legal document that is now between you and your intended parents. So that's why it's important as you sign up to be a surrogate to really read your benefits package and to make sure that you're comfortable with it, because you're pretty much going to be seeing those same financial terms in your contract. Okay, as your attorney goes through it, I think it is important to make sure that you work with your attorney to make sure that the contract is in line with the benefits package. You know, lawyers are human, and sometimes when drafting, things maybe get left out or maybe there's a mistake. So you want to make sure that your attorney has gone through both documents and compared to make sure that everything that was in your benefits package is now included in your contract. Because at the end of the day, your contract is going to have the final word. Okay, so if something was left out, if something is incorrect, then now we have to jump through additional hoops to maybe get it corrected, which it can be done, but you know, nobody wants to have to deal with that if you can prevent it. But again, yeah, you want to make sure that the contract is accurate and that it matches the benefits package. I would say that I always tell my clients, you know, once you've signed the benefits package, you're kind of locked in. My personal view is that if a surrogate asks like, oh, well, maybe now I want this, I say, well, you know, we've already kind of committed to what the benefits package says, and it goes both ways, right? You as a surrogate have agreed to this amount to move forward with this journey, and the intended parents have also agreed to this amount. So if an intended parent, if I'm representing a surrogate, an intended parent says, well, can I now pay less in compensation? I would say, no, we've already agreed to it. So I think that's a commitment that goes both ways and protects both parties. My personal view is that it's important to keep the terms of the benefits package. Another thing that is important and that will be discussed regarding your compensation and payments is it's important for you to know what documents and supporting documentation you're gonna need to request reimbursement. So for example, do you need receipts in order to get paid for childcare or housekeeping? Do you need a doctor's note? Maybe if you're on bed rest, and you need lost wages and housekeeping and childcare, you're gonna need a doctor's note. What does a doctor's note need to say? Some contracts will be very specific. They'll say, oh, your doctor's note should say the dates that the bed rest applies and what the medical reason is for that bed rest, because we want to make sure that it's directly related to the surrogacy pregnancy. So again, you want to go over that with your lawyer and make sure that you know what documents you need so that you can get them and then make your payment request to the agency. Otherwise, you might have a little bit of a delay because the agency is going to go back and say, okay, we need your receipts now. Okay, we need your doctor's note. So important for you to just be aware of what the requirements are. Also, finally, when it comes to your compensation, I do think it's important for you to know what your allowances cover. So all surrogates, once you've completed the legal phase and you have signed your contract and your intended parents have signed, your monthly allowance is going to kick in. And that is kind of a catch-all allowance that's going to cover different expenses. So you want to know as a surrogate what expenses are covered. Does it cover maybe your mileage under a certain number of miles? Does it cover maybe some childcare expenses for monthly appointments? So you want to know what's covered so that when you do make a payment request, you are doing it knowing of what's already been covered and not asking for things that have already been paid for through the monthly allowance. What you want to keep in mind is your partners. So in most cases, if you're living with a partner, that partner is going to be included in your gestational carrier agreement as a party to the contract. The reason for that is that he's going to have testing requirements. You know, the IVF clinic might require your partner to get tested for STIs and other things. And your partner's also going to have sexual abstention duties, right? Anything that your partner does in terms of taking care of their sexual health will affect you as your partner and the child that you're carrying. So the contract will include your partner so that any provisions regarding sexual health and sexual abstinence are also applicable to your partner. So again, your partner, if you live with that person, and even if you're not married, that partner may be included in the agreement. So keep that in mind and make sure to keep your agency updated if there are any changes at any point throughout your journey regarding who your partner is, whether you're living together, the status of your relationship, etc. When you're married, there's the additional layer of a presumption of parentage. So in many, many states across the US, if you're married to someone, the law will presume that that person is the parent of your baby. So of course, in a surrogacy case, we know that that's not true, right? You, the surrogate, are not the mother. You don't want to be the mother, and your husband is not the father, and he or she does not want to be a parent to that baby. So the contract will address the parentage of your husband or wife, and it will also say, you know, this person is not a legal parent. Now, what does that also mean in terms of your surrogacy arrangement as a whole? So if your partner or your husband or wife are included in the agreement, that also means that they're going to have to assist, collaborate, and participate in the process of finalizing your intended parents' parental rights. So, and that's something that we're going to discuss in a little bit, but your intended parents are going to have to obtain a court order declaring them the legal parents of your baby. And if you're married or have a partner and that person is in the contract, that person's going to have to assist and, review documents and sign them and etc. So it is important, again, that if there are any changes, that you're aware that that person might still need to collaborate with your process even after you're pregnant, right? Because the finalization of parental rights will occur during pregnancy. So with that, inform your agency immediately if there's any changes to your relationship, since that will affect your contract, and it could affect the process of finalizing parental rights and obtaining a court order regarding parentage. Navigating legal challenges. So I would say in most cases, you review your contract, you sign it, and things go very well, and you don't really need to look back to your contract. Now, of course, in some cases, questions come up throughout your journey, life changes, maybe you're having some issues that you don't really know how to handle. So I would say this is where the contract comes into play and where it can be very important. Again, it's your Bible, and it's gonna document what happens or how issues should be handled. Let's say you're having a difficult time and maybe need some additional mental health counseling. Your contract is going to discuss, okay, what are the circumstances under which you can ask for it, how much will be covered, if maybe what type of mental health counseling you have access to. So from that to, am I allowed to travel? I don't remember what my contract said about travel. Your contract is going to be your guide throughout your journey. So if there's any challenges or issues, I always say, step one, communication, talk to your agency, talk to your case manager. Most issues can be resolved by you just trusting your case manager and speaking to him or her about what's going on, and they're able to speak directly to your intended parents or to the other parties involved to help you find a solution. Sometimes certain issues are a little bit more technical and they require, legal expertise or knowledge or interpretation of the contract. In that case, I would say talk to your attorney. Your attorney should be somebody who is supporting you throughout your surrogacy journey. If you have any questions, if something comes up and you need additional assistance, you should feel comfortable emailing the lawyer who represented you or calling their office to ask, what am I supposed to do? What does my contract say about this? And in most cases, your attorney is just going to give you an interpretation. Okay, this is what your agreement says, and this is what I recommend you do. These are your next steps. Or they're going to say, let me help you, right? Let me call your agency on your behalf. Let me speak to your intended parent's attorney to see how we can find a resolution for this issue or a compromise that makes sense for everyone. So don't be nervous, and to reach out to your attorney. They are working for you on your behalf, and they owe a duty. As an attorney, they owe you a duty as a client to protect your best interests. So it's important to know that you're not alone if you are having legal challenges. The last area that I wanted to cover is the post-birth legal procedures. So I mentioned those briefly a couple minutes ago. Surrogacy is not regulated at a federal level. It's regulated on a state-by-state basis. So we have some states in the United States that are pre-birth order states, and then we have other states that are a mix. Maybe there's two phases, a pre-birth order and a post-birth order. So the process will be a little bit different depending on the state in which you live as a surrogate. Generally, the process requires the intended parents to, again, engage their attorney to draft court documents. Those court documents are going to include all of the facts of the case. So when was the contract signed? How many embryos were implanted? It's going to include a petition where the intended parents ask the court to issue an order saying that they're the legal parents and that their names go on the birth certificate and not your name. So that petition and all of those declarations and pleadings and legal documents are going to be circulated to you as a surrogate and to your lawyer. You again are going to complete another consultation with your lawyer where you go over those legal documents to make sure that they're accurate and that they, represent everything that happened throughout your journey, and that they confirm that you in fact are not the parent of the baby and that your name should not go on the birth certificate. So you'll go over those with your attorney, and if everything looks good, you and your partner or husband, wife will sign them. Normally, those documents do not require a notary. So you can just simply sign them. Now, some states are getting very modern and you can just sign them online. Others still require, old school handwritten signatures, but your attorney will guide you on what's necessary. You'll return those documents to your lawyer, and then the intended parent's attorney will take the lead on filing those documents with the appropriate court. The judge will review the case, and then he or she, judge, will issue an order saying intended parents are the legal parents. They have all rights over the child to make legal decisions, to name their child, to make medical decisions. They're responsible financially for all medical bills that are associated with the newborn's care. And they get to take physical custody of the baby immediately upon birth of the baby, and they get to be released from the hospital and go home with their baby. Now, for the surrogate, the pre-birth order will say that you and your partner or spouse are not the legal parents, that you do not have any legal parental custodial rights over that child, and that although you will cooperate with the intended parents for them to obtain any medical information that they need, they are fully responsible for any medical decisions over the child. Normally, if you're in a state where pre-birth orders are possible, that pre-birth order will be completed by around week 30 of pregnancy, so that when you go into the hospital for the delivery, the hospital already has a copy of that pre-birth order and they're fully aware that this is a surrogacy, that you as a surrogate are not the legal parent, and that the birth certificate needs to be filled out and completed in compliance with the pre-birth order. So that also means that the intended parents will have access to their baby in either a nursery or a private room, and that they'll have bands and have complete access to the child. So that also means that the baby's medical bills should not be put under your insurance or under your name. And the hospital has that court order to support that medical billing. And then, the process is completed once the birth certificate documents are signed and filled out by the intended parents. And then you as a surrogate just get to go home, recover, take the time off that you need to make sure your body's healing, and you receive your final compensation, and then you're fully done. Depending on what your contract says about communication with your intended parents, you may remain in communication with them in perpetuity. But that's really dependent, and it's a personal choice between you and your intended parents of what you're comfortable with and what type of relationship you want to have with them.
I know you said that, your lawyer should be with you throughout your whole journey. So how long does that relationship last for? Is it when birth is over, or is it, how does that work?
Yeah, so I think your attorney should be with you until everything is fully done. Your compensation has been paid and your trust account is closed because everything's been paid. Now, I'll say most surrogacy journeys are very, very smooth. There's no issues. And so you might not hear from your lawyer at all, or you might not need to reach out to your lawyer at all because everything is going well. You might just hear from your lawyer during the contract phase and then during the finalization of parental rights pre-birth order stage to make sure that you're completing those requirements. But otherwise, if there are questions, I do think that you should be able to reach out throughout your journey. I mean, I've had surrogates who, after delivery, maybe they needed some additional procedures, or maybe they had some complications, medical complications. And so they reach out to me just to make sure, hey, like, what does my contract say about this? Or can you help me talk to my intended parents about X? So that's definitely something that I like to stay involved with if it comes up. So I do think that the surrogate should have support throughout the journey.
Yeah, and I will add on there and say that not all attorneys, are as involved, and sometimes they will, charge for additional like services or questions that you have. Sometimes, they view their job as, I helped you review this contract, and then anything further than that, it's an additional expense. So definitely, if you're choosing your own attorney, that's something that you want to ask and make sure that, because your contract and your benefit package does have a budget for legal fees, that's covered if you decide to work with whoever you decide to work with, because at the end of the day, as your agency, we do have a list of referrals that we can provide you with if you want to interview different attorneys. But most of you also trust your agency to help you choose an attorney. So for the most part, the attorneys that we do refer out are like Krystel and will help you navigate your journey throughout the whole process. But again, if you're choosing to work with a different attorney, then that's something that you want to touch base on.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on that because I think you also need to feel empowered at the end of the day. You can ask questions of your attorney and say, hey, if I do have a question throughout my journey, am I able to reach out and then make decisions regarding your own representation based on that? Because at the end of the day, you have a choice. I think Road to Baby does a really good job at screening the attorneys that they refer to. So I don't think that would be much of an issue, but again, you can ask questions, and attorneys work differently across the state. So if that's something that's important to you, ask and then make decisions based on that.
You did make an important comment on compensation and the benefit package. We do also encourage our surrogates to make those changes during their admissions process, because the intended parents are already agreeing to a cost sheet. And so that's something that we're really big on, is if you are not happy with the benefit package or want to make changes, make sure that you do make them during your admissions, just so everyone goes into it knowing what to expect financially.
It goes both ways. We set the expectations, right? So you sign your benefits package so that the intended parents know what to expect financially. That's what they've agreed to. And then for you as well, now you know exactly what your compensation is going to be, and then you can plan for your future that way also.